everything we thought we knew about nutrition pretty much turned on its head. I remember South Park actually did an episode where they turned the food pyramid upside down. Oh, we've turned it the wrong way. It's supposed to be this way.
Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because it's true. I remember I got to testify before the Dietary Guidelines Committee back in 2010, so 2 of them ago. I was one of 2 lay people in the whole United States. There was 48 total people there, which is disgusting with 300 and something million people in this country, and 48 people go to lobby the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee, but that's neither here nor there. I get up there and I tell them pretty explicitly, Jennifer, I said, you know, I did everything the opposite of what you said to do, and I got healthy, and I lost weight, and I feel good, and I have a lot of friends in my sphere of influence that the same thing happened to them. And if you don't figure this out, I'm going to come back here in 5 years from now and point the finger at you and ask you, why? Because diabetes keeps getting worse, obesity keeps getting worse, heart disease is the #1 killer in America of all people. And then we had that crazy virus last year, and the most people that got susceptible to it were the people that were metabolically unhealthy, that all of this dietary advice we've been given led them down that path to being that way. So, wow, such an opening when you learned about what saturated fat did in a good way.
Yeah, it was fascinating. And just on that point, I think we're missing a huge opportunity in this country and around the world to talk about metabolic health related to COVID. I mean, really, couldn't we just say, hey, another great way to combat this virus is to improve your metabolic health? But it doesn't seem to be. I mean, it's coming out, you know, at lower levels, but not from the top.
But it's coming from influencers like me and some of the medical doctors, especially within the alternative health and real food type of communities, keto, or even the vegan. Some of the vegan doctors are even talking that way as well. But you're right. It's not coming from Dr. Fauci on down, and it needs to. And to me, when this first went all down, if you weren't tightening up your diet and you weren't getting, like, I was bumping up my vitamin D levels a little bit in supplementation, just all of these things, why weren't they screaming those things? Because those of us in the know, we know, and we did. Those that didn't know, they're left in the dark, washing their hands, socially distancing, wearing a mask, and thinking, oh, I'm healthy, and now take the jab in the arm. Oh, I'm healthy because of those things. And they don't realize there's other things you could be doing and should be doing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, that was one of the reasons I wanted to make the film is, you know, once I learned this information, I kind of had my own personal confirmation in my own body. And then at the same time started reading, you know, reading Nina's book, Nina Teichel's book, Gary Taubes' books, and spreading out to Jason Fung, and, you know, just all these people, and looking at this information and thinking, wow, I had seen documentaries that had touched on this information, but not one that had sort of comprehensively wrapped it all up and into a single piece. And so I thought we could do a film about it. And so I started reaching out to the people who are in the film, and you know, amazingly and wonderfully, they all said yes to interview for the film. And so we just started chipping away at it. It took us about 2.5 years to produce the film, but yeah, got it together. And one of the big driving forces for me was the type 2 diabetes community.
Yes.
And they have been told, you know, the dietary guidelines are one thing. Yes, I do feel like there needs to be a low carb option in the dietary guidelines. But then also the American Diabetes Association been telling people with type 2 diabetes that they need to eat carbohydrates, consistent carbohydrates throughout the day, you know, healthy whole grains.
Yeah.
They've just been given bad advice.
Well, thankfully that has changed circa 1.5 years ago. They have a new president at the ADA, and she is a low carb type 2 diabetic. And so she came in and she's like, guys, carbohydrate restriction is the key to controlling this disease. It's literally, type 2 diabetes is literally a disease of carbohydrate intolerance. So let's tell people, all right, you want to keep doing the diabetes diet and shoot your insulin and all the meds, that's one way. Or give them the option, like you said in the dietary guidelines, to do low carb. So at least good things are happening on that front.
Yes.
But then the American Heart Association, still hopelessly fat phobic,
Yeah.
they are one of the biggest promoters of fat fiction.
The Heart Association?
Yeah.
Yeah, of the fat fiction, not of our film.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
they
Yeah,
are.
I was doing a play words of your.
Perpetuating the fat fiction. Yeah, yes, yeah, for sure. They still are. And yeah, it was wonderful to see the American Diabetes Association come out with that recommendation, that very low carbohydrate diets actually do work. And that happened right as we were finishing editing the film. And so we were able to get it into the very end of the film.
Good.
They just released that. But gosh, it's just so recent. All these years, these people have been told the wrong thing.
And then Diabetes Canada last year followed suit. So they now have a low carb option in their diabetes education as well. I think slowly but surely the message is getting out. And I've been at this game a long time, 17 years I've been in this space. And when I started, it was like a desert. It was just nothing. It was just low carb bad, meat bad, fat gonna clog your arteries bad. And now we go, okay, there's healthy fats. Okay. You could probably incorporate meat within the balanced diet. You still have the negative organizations and people out there, but for the most part, it's softened a lot. And I think Nina Teicholz's book definitely had a big role in that. Obviously, Gary Taubes's book. A lot of people are putting this positive message. When Mark Hyman wrote a book about fat being healthy, I think that was a game changer.
Yeah. Mark has been a big influence in this whole discussion and continues to be. And is diving even deeper into the connections to soil health, and his latest book really takes a comprehensive look at not just nutrition, but how can we do this as a society in a way that's good for the planet, good for people. And I think he's doing fabulous work in the space. So it's great. It's good. There's these pioneers out there that continue to push, you included in that. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. One of the pioneers that I first reached out to when I came online is in your film, Dr. Johnny Bowden. Yes. Very big and so well spoken. I love Johnny. He sounds like Casey Kasem to me, if you remember the 1980s.
Yeah.
40. He sounds just like Casey Kasem. And I remember 1 month into blogging, he sent me an autographed copy of his book, Living the Low Carb Life. And I was like, whoa, an author reached out to me and autographed his book. And he was like, I love the work you're doing with Living La Vida Low Carb. Keep it up. And I was like, wow, that's kind of cool. And now I'm an author that sends people books with my autograph. And it's kind of fun to see this full circle. But you got some heavy names in this film. Johnny, definitely one of them. Mark Hyman. Talk about some of the other people in there. Johnny was fantastic. He actually came into our community. He flew into town for us and interviewed with us in our community just to keep the cost down. I mean, we were on a we did this all independently because we couldn't take any food industry or pharmaceutical funding or anything like that. We didn't want to have any appearance of, influence on the film. And so he came into town and spent a whole day with us, and he's fantastic. I mean, he's such a vibrant, spark, and he was a great interview, and I think he adds tremendously to the film. And I love him. He's older than my mom and dad, but he's more energetic. Like, it's night and day looking at my mom and dad and looking at Johnny Bowden and going, they can't possibly around the same age, and they are. It's the power of real food, the power of eating food to your needs with the hormones and everything. Johnny, awesome.
And his book, The Great Cholesterol Myth, was also a great source of information for me as I was researching for the film too. And then we had Professor Tim Noakes from South Africa who interviewed with us and told us his amazing story of he was kind of the king of carb loading for athletes, and he'd written the book on running, and it was really interesting to hear his transformation and, again, his own personal health journey.
And nutrition pages now.
pages, yeah, of the book. Yeah, because for those who haven't seen the film, the whole first chapter of his book was about carb loading and how athletes needed to, consume a lot of carbohydrates before their races. And then he was doing this for many years, and then he became diabetic, type 2 diabetic himself, and he finally figured out it was the carbohydrates. And so he's kind of famously torn out the whole first chapter of his book, the pages out, and I think he's in the process of rewriting that. But yeah, he's done a complete flip.
And you want to talk about somebody that's enthusiastic and infectious. When you're around Tim Noakes, I got to go speak on a stage with a lot of the people in your film back in 2015. Tim brought in a bunch of us to Cape Town, South Africa, and we spoke on a stage and did this big conference, a huge auditorium, like all these medical health professionals getting CME credits. And I'm just like, like literally when I got off the plane, I got in a cab. Oh, what you here for? And I said, well, if you heard of this guy, Tim Noakes? He's like, that's like asking in a church if anybody knows Jesus. Everybody knows. Like,
yeah, he's so highly regarded. He's done so much good in South Africa and around the world too. And he's just a gem of a guy. Yeah, he was really fun to meet and fun to interview. So.
And run through the ringer because of those beliefs around banting, what they call banting. But yeah, he had a really tough time, but he won. That was the fun part. And did you put that in the film that he was able to overcome those things? Or
yeah, we did. Yeah, we talked about him winning the trial at the end of the film, and Zoe Harcombe and Nina Teichels both testified in his trial. Yes. And it was interesting, I've seen a little bit of footage about that trial, and one of the funny things that was said was that the Tim Noakes side of the table, it was apparently like this big U-shaped table with, the dietetics, folks on one side. They were all accusing him of medical malpractice, and then there was Tim Noakes's defense team on the other side, and apparently, Tim Noakes's defense team were all, super fit, low carb folks that were really alert and on their game and knew all their stuff. And the other side of the table, after lunch, people were kind of nodding off and falling asleep and having a hard time because of all the carbohydrates that they were eating. So I thought that was a pretty interesting story just about.
It's quite well, that's for sure. And you mentioned Zoe Harcombe. Talk about a firecracker. She's over in Europe as well. Talk about her.
Yeah, Zoe's so great. She's fantastic. She also has just been really supportive of the film and helpful to me just with research and information. And she's an obesity researcher who went back and looked at, basically all the scientific evidence that was available leading up to the initial dietary guidelines. And basically her research found that there wasn't evidence to prove that a so-called low-fat diet was heart healthy. And so even at the time that the dietary guidelines were first established, there wasn't the science to back it up. So her research is fascinating, and she's an incredibly meticulous, mathematician and researcher. She's amazing.
And she definitely has the kind of British wit and sarcasm. She'll throw it right back at you. It's really good.
Yeah, she's fantastic. Yeah.
So, you've named some big names in there, and it's wonderful. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, Gary Taubes is in the film, and of course, he's done some of the original work in this space. Oh, yeah. With his article, "What If It's All Been a Big Fat Lie," originally being published. When was that? I think 2002. Yeah, 2002.
Because I came 3 years later. My weight loss was in 2004 on the Atkins diet, and then I started blogging 2005, and then I interviewed Gary for the first time on the Living La Vida Low Carb show in 2007. So yeah, he came a few years before I did.